Not every comic is a modern day hit, sometimes they get lost to history, even if they shouldn't. Let's revisit some together. Way back in the early days before Marvel was named Marvel, they were known as Timely Comics. They were founded in 1939, changed the name to Atlas Comics in 1951, until landing on Marvel Comics in the early 1960s. While the early days gave us the heroes we still read about, lots were humor-based comics. The Powerhouse Pepper is one of those. The Powerhouse Pepper was a hero that first debuted in Joker Comics 1 in April of 1942. The idea for the hero was a big-hearted boxer, with below-average intelligence, primarily engaging in the slapstick genre. While he was mainly in backup comics at the start, eventually he got his own series named after him. Powerhouse Pepper ran from 1943 to 1948, that's quite a bit of time, and yet there were only 6 issues in the entire series. The first one came out, and then it was 5 years until the rest released. In that time, the character was being featured in other comics, some that we'll cover a bit later on. The golden age of comic books refers to the time period from 1939 to about 1956. Happened right about when World War II was going on. People wanted lighthearted stories and brave heroes and easy to digest entertainment. After the war ended, comics weren't doing as well, so Marvel shifted its focus to trying new things. One being releasing comics catered to girls. Millie the Model is probably the most famous. Millie Collins first appeared in her self-titled series in 1945, but she stuck around. She appeared in X-Men, other Marvel-released model comics, as well as met the Avengers. She is pretty famous in her world. Fans have shown up to the wedding of Reed Richards and Susan Storm, and they were hoping to get a glimpse of Millie. That wedding was like a royal wedding in the Marvel universe, so if people are chatting about Miss Millie, she must be a big deal. The Millie the Model series is categorized as a romance, but it also featured some romance adventure vibes and was known for its humor. In 1968, at the New York Comic Art Convention, it won an award for Best Romance Comic, and the general public really enjoyed the character, and she even got a few spin-offs. I don't blame them for reading a few issues. Millie is quite charming. Hair of gold, heart of gold kind of gal. Millie was part of a Marvel series of career girl releases. One of the others that didn't gain popularity was Tessie the Typist. It was another romance humor series published from 1944 to 1949. Tessie the Typist was her series, but she appeared even earlier than that in the Joker comic series from 1942 to 1950. Those years greatly influenced her character. Women were needed in the workforce because most men were on the front lines in the real world, so Tessie had a variety of jobs to promote the working woman idea. Her series leaned into this idea too. She was always seeking out ways to be active in her community. Her character was very popular at the time. She was frequently seen on the covers of Joker comics as well as selling well on her own, until girls like Millie Collins and Patsy Walker hit the stands and pushed her out of the spotlight. The Tessie the Typist comics are generally made up of a bunch of shorter stories. Most of the humor appears to be slapstick or from like misunderstandings. Both Millie and Tessie had backup stories that featured Powerhouse Pepper. American comic anthology U.S.A Comics published its first issue in 1941. It ran for 17 issues, ending in 1945. With a title like that, I am happy to report the comics did feature the spokesman for Red, White, and Blue, Mr. Captain America. The series was actually announced in the first ever Captain America issue. Until issue 6, when Cap took the spotlight, the series, there was no, headliner for it, but it featured heroes like Whizzer and Jack Frost. Many stories in the series shared the overall theme of World War II. The covers of the comics and contents of the stories were very pro-American, and there are even a few that feature a not-so-nice mustached guy getting a knock to the noggin. The series is an example of some early work from Marvel icon Stan Lee. The 15-issue series Teen Comics ran from 1947 to 1950. They were stories about teen life, the most prominent character being that of Patsy Walker, but you may know her as Hellcat. Important to note, in Defenders 89, it was revealed that any Patsy Walker story published between 1944 and 65 were fictional and created by a woman named Dorothy Walker on Earth 616. However, the stories were based on Dorothy's daughter, Patricia, so technically the teen comics happened but didn't happen. The series has undergone a lot of changes. It was first all winter comics for 19 issues, which focused on superheroes like Captain America and Human Torch. There was a sharp shift in issue 20, the name changed to All Teen for one issue, and now the story was about teenagers. Then it became Teen Comics until moving into the name Journey into Unknown Worlds after issue 35. That was another content shift, as that was all science fiction horror stuff. What's odd is All Winners had an issue 21, but it had nothing to do with the chain we just covered. The reason for these massive shifts might have something to do with the fact that the comic world itself was just a little unstable and was always adapting to what was happening at the time. Marvel Preview premiered in 1975 as a black and white magazine, but with issue 25 in 1981, it became Bizarre Adventures. The series introduced characters like Star-Lord and Rocket Raccoon, and it wasn't a series based around one hero. It would always use various characters for like little one-offs almost. It seemed like the series was designed to give writers a chance to play with ideas and stories that didn't fit in with the Marvel universe. It's described as a Marvel anthology comic filled cover to cover with genre-bending stories of odd characters and strange worlds designed to spark the imagination. Almost every cover and issue would feature a new set of characters. They would start with a little bit of info and the contents of the issue, and then jump right in with a comic about the character. The series printed from 1975 to 1980 as Marvel Preview, then from 1981 to 1983 as Bizarre Adventures. The series, while cool, it didn't pick up much, partly because of unreliable publishing. A character would be promised for the next issue and then not show up until later. Sometimes issues would get pulled and reprinted. It wasn't the easiest reader experience. In 2019, Bizarre Adventures was revived for one issue. That issue featured Ulysses Bloodstone. Lorna the Jungle Girl, or Jungle Queen depending on when you're looking at it, was first published in 1953. It featured Lorna. Her mother died giving birth to her and her dad was mauled by a lion, so Lorna grew up with her father's friend, a chief in the African jungle. Growing up, she learned how to use spears and knives and generally grew very strong. She also developed an ability to understand the animals around her to a degree. Eventually, she became protector of the jungle. The series had 26 issues, and currently, we don't know where Lorna went. She was last seen capturing the Night Beast and saving her home. There have been reprints issued of Lorna, just nothing new. She was featured in a list on CBR about Marvel's 10 best Golden Age heroines, and that's her most recent mention. 3 comic book series fell under one name, Mystic Comics. 2 out of 3 were superhero anthologies, and the other was a horror suspense fiction anthology. The first 2 came out during the Golden Age of comics, and there was no star of the show. Each issue would feature new characters. The comics did introduce a few notable characters, like the Destroyer for example. Volume 1 ran from 1940 to 1942, Volume 2 ran from 1944 to 45, totaling 14 issues altogether. The third edition of Mystic was published in 1951 and ran until 57, featuring 61 issues. This series began before the Comics Code of Authority did. The CCA was formed in 1954 because there was a public worry over the content in comic books. People felt like they were too violent. The CCA was created as a way of easing people's minds. It was run by comic publishers and was totally voluntary, but most publishers used it because it made it more likely a parent would buy the issue if they saw the CCA stamp of approval. Unfortunately, for the Mystic Horror Comics Volume 3, that meant it had to scale back the horror aspect a bit in post-CCA issues. Sticking with the science fiction horror vibes, we are looking at Uncanny Tales. The Uncanny Tales series had 2 volumes. The first was published between 1952 to 57, the second between 1973 to 75. That first series also had to scale back the scary stuff after the CCA came into effect, but by that point, 28 issues had been released. In total, between the 2 volumes, 68 issues were published. Like the Mystic Comics, there is no title superhero. The common thing between all the stories are the themes. Some are pretty gruesome, think like Edgar Allan Poe kind of vibes. Of course, I have examples. In Volume 2, Issue 1, there are 4 stories. One is about a deranged doctor that wants to remove a chicken's head, later a person's head, and then the next is about an innkeeper that keeps wolves in the basement specifically to get guests that go where they shouldn't so the innkeeper can take their stuff. Yeah, the other 2, don't think I can describe on camera. The way the comics are drawn is very unsettling, the people are very expressive, and there's lots of harsh lines in contrast that bring out the darker tone. It's generally very well done. One of the longest to make this list is Strange Tales. It had 168 issues printed between 1951 to 68. It started out as a horror anthology, but once CCA appeared, it scaled back that aspect too. Instead, it revamped and focused on mirroring current trends, like the monsters you would see in science fiction films of the time. Strange Tales, though technically not part of Marvel Comics directly, the main universe, it had a large part in bringing characters to that panel. Prototypes for Spider-Man characters Aunt May and Uncle Ben were featured in Strange Tales 97 in the story Goodbye to Linda Brown. When comics shifted into the Silver Age, Strange Tales shifted to superheroes, at least for the main stuff. Backup stories were still the horror stuff fans were used to. Doctor Strange debuted in Strange Tales 110 in 1963. The story is about Strange helping a man plagued by nightmares. The series was revived in the 1970s and then again in the 80s. It became a comic that would pick up characters if their individual stories were cancelled. This was the case with Doctor Strange. Nick Fury, The Thing, Human Torch, Doctor Strange, and Spider-Man are just a few names that have appeared in Strange Tales. With all the character debuts and hero features, Strange Tales has cemented itself as an incredibly important Marvel comic. Thanks so much y'all for watching. I know that was a lot of history. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and make your mark on the comment section down below. Let me know what you would add to this list and if you've ever read any of these titles. This is Juliana signing off. See you later.